Good afternoon and welcome to the FEMA Region 2 Individual and Community Preparedness Webinar Series. My name is Allison Albright and I'm the Regional Preparedness Liaison for FEMA Region 2. I'm going to provide a few technical considerations before we begin. Today's proceedings are being recorded and captioned. The archived event will be available on the FEMA website in the coming days. You should hear audio through your computer speakers, so please ensure your volume is turned up so you may hear the proceedings accordingly. In the top right corner, we ask if you'd like to receive news and updates from Region 2, and if so, please enter your email address, and we'll be sure to add you to our distribution list. We will have a question and answer session after the presentation concludes. You'll see a Q&A pod on the lower right-hand corner. Please feel free to submit your questions about the subject matter there, and time permitting, we'll do our best to answer them. Finally, the PowerPoint presentation from today will be available for you to download in the file share pod as a PDF. You can click on the file and download it using the download button. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to Bijal Patel to introduce our speaker in today's proceedings.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Bijal Patel, a preparedness specialist with FEMA Region 2. On behalf of our team working to strengthen preparedness across New York, New Jersey, Puerto Rico, and the U.S. Virgin Islands, I'm happy to welcome you to our Preparedness and Resilience webinar series. FEMA's first goal is to build a culture of preparedness. The Region 2 Individual and Community Preparedness Program is focused on helping people prepare for disasters. So this includes increasing the percentage of people who are prepared during a pandemic and also delivering trainings to help nonprofits, small businesses, and community-based organizations continue service delivery after disaster. As a part of this goal, we're pleased to be hosting today's webinar on the Assistance to Firefighter Grant Program, or AFG. Our speaker, Brian Thomas, will provide a brief overview of the AFG grants, grant management, and grant writing. He will also provide tips on how to develop a successful grant application. So our speaker, Brian S. Thomas, has been a member of FEMA Region 2 since March of 2010 and has served in multiple roles, which include Senior Watch Officer, Situational Awareness Unit Leader, Radiological Exercise Evaluator, and Regional Fire Program Specialist. Before FEMA, Brian worked as an analyst for the Transportation Security Administration, and he was an intelligence analyst while working in the U.S. Marine Corps. He has over 15 years of federal service. He has a Bachelor of Arts degree in Political Science and a Master of Science in Organizational Leadership from Mercy College. Brian is also a graduate of the FEMA Future Leaders Program. So thank you for being here today, Brian, and I'm going to turn it over to you.
Ladies, thanks very much for that great introduction, and thank you to all the folks joining us. It looks like we got about 90 people. I'm really excited to talk to you today about the Assistance to Firefighter Grant Program, so thanks for logging in. I just want to put my contact information up here. I speak really fast. I am a New Yorker. I got a lot of slides to go through, so if you feel like I'm going too fast, please shoot me an email, give me a call. I'd be happy to talk about AFG with you one-on-one if you want to talk about it. This is not the last time you'll see my contact information. I'm going to put it up again later on. So for today's program, what I'm going to talk about is an overview of AFG, what it is, what it does, what it can do for you. I'm going to talk to you about the award process, and maybe we could track applications and see once they're submitted where they go and where they end up. I'm going to talk about the types of applications you can submit because it's not just equipment. There's also vehicles and training and some other things in there. We'll go over that. And then I want to talk about application development and maybe give some tips on how to put together a successful AFG application. So a lot to cover. I'm going to try to breeze through. You're also going to have an opportunity for questions at the end, so don't feel like if I go too fast, it's the last you'll ever hear about it. Feel free to put in a question later. So first question that I often get is, who is eligible for an AFG grant? And the answer is these things that you see on the screen here. Fire departments, whether they're full paid career fire departments or volunteer fire departments, or a combination of the two. Non-affiliated EMS, those are your emergency medical services like ambulance corps, first aid squadrons. All those folks are also eligible for AFG awards. And then finally, state fire training academies. Some states have them, some states do not. But if your state does have a state fire training academy, they are eligible for an AFG award. This is just to give you an idea of the type of money that's up for grabs here. When you're submitting your AFG application, this is what you're fighting for. And usually the one that folks are most interested in is that top row there. That's the Assistance to Firefighter Grant Program. There's $316 million up for grabs last year. I'm assuming it's going to be the same amount of money as it was last year coming into this next round. There's also the SAFER grant, which stands for Staffing for Adequate Fire and Emergency Response. There's $350 million available for that program. That's your hiring needs, recruitment, retention. And then there's another $34 million on the table for the FP&S, which is the Fire Prevention and Safety. Things like smoke detectors, carbon monoxide detectors, educational pamphlets. Those are some things you could apply for. So understanding the AFG award process, this is kind of like a one-year life cycle, one-year lifespan of the AFG program. So the very first thing that happens in our life cycle is the Notice of Funding Opportunity will be published on the FEMA website. Notice of Funding Opportunity, also known as the NOFO, has all of the important information you need to know before you submit your application. And I'm going to go over some of the important stuff in this presentation. So once the NOFO comes out, you're going to read that carefully. And about 1 month later, the application period is going to open up. That's when you're going to log into FEMA Go and you're going to put together your application. And you've got about 30 days to do that. From day one of the application period, you got 1 month to finish that application. You could start it, you could save, you could exit out and come back in a couple days. Anyway, yeah, you'll have a month to put together your application. Then once you hit that submit button, the very first thing that happens is your application will go through an electronic scoring process, because within the application, a lot of those questions are weighted. What I mean by weighted is they have a point value. And based on how you answer questions in the application, you're going to rack up points. And that's going to go into the electronic scoring process. Now, if you score high enough on the electronic scoring, your application will move on to the next step, which is peer panel review. If you do not score high enough in electronic scoring, that is where your application dies. It does not go any further, and you will not be considered for an award. So very important to hit those weighted questions, and I'm going to talk to you about that as we move on a little bit. So if you're fortunate enough to make it into the peer panel review, that is the next step. That is where it's exactly what it sounds like. There's a panel of your peers grading your applications. It's not a FEMA person like myself. It's a first responder. It's a firefighter, an EMT, someone who works in your business. And those folks, they make a recommendation in peer panel review, and they give us that recommendation. When I say us, I mean FEMA, the technical review, also known as post-panel review. That is the first time someone from FEMA is ever going to take a look at your application. So first it goes through the electronic scoring, then it goes to a panel of your peers, and if they recommend you, that's when it will come to FEMA for the final review. And if FEMA agrees with the peer panel review, we will then announce the awards. And that's the last step in the life cycle of AFG, is the awards get announced. Now after that final award gets announced and all the awards are out the door, the Notice of Funding Opportunity for the next year will come out, and it'll go right back to the beginning of the cycle. So what you're looking at here takes about 1 year to complete. We talked about the application period. Once it opens up, you're going to go to that link. You're going to click on it. You don't need my slideshow for the link. You don't need me for the link. If you go to Google and you type in FEMA AFG application, it'll be the first hit you see. And that'll take you to FEMA Go. So if you're not familiar with this screen that you're looking at right now, this is the FEMA Go login screen. If it's the first time you're seeing this, that means you don't already have a FEMA Go account. If you want to apply for a FEMA AFG grant, you should set your account up now, because it's not that easy. There's a lot of kinks in it. FEMA Go is a brand new system. So set up your account now, so when the NOFO comes out, you're all ready to go and log in. So there is some planning and preparation that you can do before the application period even opens up. I'm going to give you some tips on what you can do to get ready. First thing I would suggest doing is a risk assessment. And it sounds fancy, sounds complicated. It really isn't. When I'm asking you to do a risk assessment, it's go around your organization, your firehouse or your ambulance squad headquarters, and make a list of the oldest stuff you have. Stuff that is broken down, things that you have to pump money into to repair all the time, the things that you need to replace the most. So that is what I mean by doing a risk assessment. Make a list of the things that you need. And then you're going to go to the NOFO once it's published, and you're going to find out if within the NOFO, something on your list has a red H next to it. Because if it has a red H next to it, that means it's a high priority of the program. So let's say you're doing your risk assessment and you see that your cascade fill station for your SCBAs, your breathing apparatus, the cascade fill station is broken, it's old, it's not meeting your needs anymore. You go in the NOFO, you're going to see that cascade fill stations are a high priority. That's something that you should apply for. If on your list of things that you made in your risk assessment, you find out in the NOFO that it's got a blue M or a gray L next to it, that means it's a medium or low priority and you should not apply for it. And the reason why I'm telling you not to apply for it is because FEMA rarely, if ever, gives out money for a low or medium priority item. You only want to apply for high priority items. So you do your risk assessment, you see that your chemical and biological suits are worn out, you know, they don't hold an airtight seal, they're no longer meeting your needs. You go to the NOFO and you're going to see that bio and chem suits are a low priority. I don't know why they are. They just are. Do not apply for them, because if you apply, you're going to waste your time, and it's very unlikely that you get that. Also, some other things you can do to prepare is do a self-evaluation sheet. If you click on that link, or you just, like I said before, go to Google, type in FEMA AFG self-evaluation sheet. It's going to take you right there. It's the first PDF you're going to see. So in that self-evaluation sheet, it's going to give you some tips on what you should be applying for, and it's also going to give you tips on how to put together your narrative. And I'm going to talk about the narrative in a little while. It's very important. Also, at the same site where you get the evaluation sheet, there's a thing called the application checklist. It's kind of important. You know, none of this is obligatory. You don't have to do any of this. But if you can go to that checklist and get all your ducks in a row, find out, yes, I have a FEMA Go account. Yes, I did a risk assessment. Yes, the thing I'm asking for is a high priority. The checklist is going to save you from yourself making any mistakes. So I encourage that. And then one more thing you can do before you even apply is make a list of the critical infrastructure that is in your area of responsibility. I'm talking about schools and universities, healthcare facilities, maybe water treatment plants, bridges, tunnels. All those things are what's going to make your application a high priority for FEMA. So what we're doing is we're giving out money to folks who have the biggest need. And if you have a piece of critical infrastructure in your area of responsibility, you're more likely to get that grant. So definitely make a list of that stuff. Okay, so we talked about preparation. Now it's time to submit your application. This is what I like to call a good news slide, because if you're somewhat familiar with the AFG program, but not really, this might be news to you. You don't only submit one AFG application. You have at least 3 opportunities. You could submit 3 applications, and I'm going to talk to you about it. So the first application, which most people are interested in, is the ops and safety application. That's where you're going to get your equipment, your training, your PPE, maybe a modification to your facility. That's the most popular one. But after you hit the submit button on your ops and safety, you could log out, log back in, and then you could submit a vehicle application. And you can go for a new ambulance or a new chief's vehicle. You could log out, you log back in, and you could submit a regional application for more equipment with some of your neighbors. So if you're in a fire department and you go on these mutual aid calls with the same neighboring fire departments every call, you get together with the chiefs of those neighboring departments and you put together a regional application and you try to get some equipment for all of the departments. So you want to put in your ops and safety application, you want to put in your regional application, and you want to put in a vehicle application. Non-affiliated EMS folks can do the same thing. State fire training academies cannot. State fire training academies are only eligible for the one, the ops and safety. Okay. Let's talk a little bit more about ops and safety because it's so popular. This is where you're going to get your equipment. I'm going to talk about what type of equipment on the next slide. But also you can get money for a wellness and fitness program, you know, immunizations, things like that. Personal protective equipment, that's your SCBA and your turnout gear. FEMA will pay for training. FEMA will pay for modification to your facility as well. Yep, this is one of those fancy slides with some effects. So give me a second here while we get to the next one. There we go. So I talked about some of your basic fire equipment. Those are your hoses, your nozzles, extrication tools, thermal imaging cameras, communications equipment, you know, your radios, pagers, base stations. So if you were thinking about applying for pagers, they're only available for those folks who serve rural areas. Folks in urban areas, the high populated areas are not eligible for pagers. Extrication tools I talked about, rescue equipment, your jaws of life, your cutters, your spreaders, that's all high priority in the NOFO every year. EMS equipment, you got your power cots, AEDs, CPR devices, all that stuff's high priority as well. Other equipment here, your cascade fill stations, which I mentioned before. You got your washer, dryer, extractor. Those things are always a high priority as well. Look in the NOFO. If you go through the NOFO, there's a list of all the high priority items that you should be thinking about applying for. So this is a pretty important slide. This is called the purpose question. I talked earlier about weighted questions, those questions with a point value. So one of the most important one is what's called the purpose question in the application. And the reason why it's important is because if you answer the wrong answer here, that's where your application is going to die, and it's not going to get to peer panel review. You only want to choose one of these 3 red answers, which can be found in the NOFO. This is not a cheat code or a secret. This is right there in the NOFO. The high priority answers are obtain equipment to achieve minimum standard, replace unusable or unrepairable equipment, or replace non-compliant equipment to current standard. Those are your high priority answers. If you answer one of the below, obtain equipment for new mission or upgrade technology to current standard, that's low priority, and the information that you're entering there is what's going to keep you out of peer panel review. You're looking for red H's in the NOFO, and we're avoiding the blue M's and the gray L's. Just an example of your PPE, your turnout gear there. If you're in the fire service or EMS service, you know what that looks like. Personal escape devices are also in PPE, and they are a high priority every year. And obviously, the #1 item that AFG gives out money for every year is SCBA. This is your breathing apparatus. The FEMA definition of one set of SCBA is your pack, your mask, and 2 cylinders. Pack, mask, 2 cylinders. Wellness and fitness, that's another thing that you can apply for in the ops and safety application. So health screenings, physical exams, immunization, cancer screenings is a big one. You know, we want to make sure our firefighters are safe out there while they're protecting us. FEMA also gives money for health and wellness as far as exercise equipment. So you can get an elliptical machine or a treadmill through the AFG program. Believe it or not, that is a high priority because firefighter health and wellness is a high priority for the program. Modifications to facilities, that's also located inside the ops and safety application. You could ask for a source capture exhaust, a new fire alarm system, a new sprinkler system. That source capture exhaust is a very popular item. AFG gives out a lot of money every year for that. You know, that's what's, keeping the hazardous fumes out of our firefighters' lungs. Definitely a high priority. Think about applying for it. We do pay for training, as I mentioned before. All your basic NFPA compliant training, Firefighter 1, Firefighter 2. You got your driver's training. That EVOC training is a high priority. All EMS, ALS level training is a high priority. So after you're done with your ops and safety, you're going to log out, you're going to log right back in, and you're going to submit a vehicle application if you want. You don't have to. FEMA does give out money for vehicles every year. It's hard to get. It's like the golden goose egg of the AFG program, but you could get it. You're going to get your unsafe vehicles replaced, all those old vehicles. You're going to get a new vehicle with that money. Then you can put it in a regional application. All the things I mentioned before in ops and safety are eligible for your regional applications. So you go out, you log in, you get together with your other fire chiefs, and you can put in another one. Vehicles are eligible through the regional application. So you could ask for a vehicle in your regional application as well. So now I'm going to spend the last couple minutes here talking about the narrative and how you can put together a successful AFG application. So just a couple tips here. You want to write it so that your department's needs are clear, very specific to your department. Nothing national. You certainly do not want to cut and paste from something you found on the internet, especially from a vendor's website, because if you cut and paste the same blurb that Scott Airpack has on their website about why Scott Airpacks are important to firefighter safety, the peer panel review is going to read the same narrative over and over again, and it's not going to look good for your application. So definitely don't cut and paste. As always, have somebody take a look at it as well, get a pair of fresh eyes on that application, specifically somebody that's in the fire service, because you want to be able to relate that your needs are not being met somewhere and that the AFG program can help you out. Only local information, as I mentioned before. Provide information that is unique to your community, what's special about you. That's where we talked about that critical infrastructure. What is it about you that makes you more important than the next guy? Why do you need this AFG grant more than the next guy does? So be specific. Don't use brand names. That's just a weird one. Federal government's weird about brand names. If you need air packs, just say you need air packs. Don't say you need Scott air packs. And as always, focus on the high priorities. Look for those red H's. If you're asking for something that's got a blue M or a gray L next to it, you don't want to do that. So a little bit more about the narrative. There's going to be 5 narrative boxes once you're separating, once you're submitting your application. The very first one, and in my mind, what's one of the most important, is the community and agency description. So I spoke about on the last slide what's important about your fire service, your area of responsibility. The reason why this is important is because it's the very first thing the peer panel review sees. You get past computer pre-score, you get into peer panel review, some firefighter or EMT is going to pick up your application, and the very first thing that they're going to read is what is unique about you, what makes you special. So you really want to separate yourself from the pack by giving a good description of who you are, who you serve, and what's unique about that. The next section is the project description and the project budget. That's really simple, cut and dry. It's what do you want, how much is it going to cost, and how long is it going to take for you to complete that project. The next one is, in my opinion, the most important of the 5 narrative boxes. It's the financial need. So when you're describing your financial need, this is really why the AFG program exists. You know, federal government understands that there is a dire financial need in the first responder community. And you got to make yourself sound like you need this money to survive. You need this money to keep your volunteer fire service open. Or if you're in one of the paid full times, your stuff is old, it's broken down, you're not able to serve your community because you don't have the equipment you need. You really got to hit the financial needs section hard. Don't breeze through it. This is the one where you want to be most detailed. So you want to talk about how your fundraising dollars are down, your community doesn't have the expendable income that they used to, and you can't afford to keep your company running. So really hit that financial needs section hard. Cost benefit, that's another one. Really just you want to explain how this grant is going to get you the most bang for your buck. You want to minimize the cost and maximize the benefit. So for this small amount of money that you're going to give us with this grant money, we're going to be able to do this great project that's going to save this many lives. Okay? And then last but not least, the effect on daily operations. That's really like a summary. You're going to put together your most important points from the 4 previous boxes. You're going to put it together just like any paper you've ever written in your academic career. You're going to mention all those main points that you hit earlier. And that's the end. That's your summary. So those are your 5 narrative boxes. Just a quick tip before my time's up here. The self-evaluation sheets are really important because it's going to give you an idea of what the peer panel review is looking for. You want to get the peer panel review's attention. You want to know what it is that they're looking for in the application. If you go to the self-evaluation sheet, that's going to help you get a good idea of what those guys are scoring, those guys and girls are scoring. So it looks like I hit it in just about time. I got about 30 seconds left. I do want to open up for questions. And while we're going to do that, I want to put my contact information on the screen. And I'm going to pass it off to the ladies, Allison and Bibi. Did you guys have anything that you needed to say?
Nope. I will read out the questions to you, Brian, if you don't mind.
Sounds good.
Okay. I also want to add that the files are available to download right to the left of the Q&A pod and to the right of the caption box. So you can just click on the file. It begins with 08 September and then hit download. So our first question for Brian is that are there any examples of past year successes or best practices from previous applications?
Yeah, so what you can do is you can get with me one-on-one for that, and I'd be happy to talk to you about strengths and weaknesses. So specific to say a fire department or an E&S department that submitted an application and failed. This application did not get to peer panel review. What we can do is you can set up a meeting, and I will look at that with you and then try to find out where you went wrong. Kind of like a post review and try to see if we can get you on the right track. When it comes to some of the information, I can't give out some very specific areas, but we can go over strengths and weaknesses. Sure, we can definitely do a lessons learned with you.
Okay, thank you. The second question is, how often are the priorities reviewed? Is there a possibility that lessons learned from the COVID-19 pandemic can be factored in for updated priorities?
Yeah, that's a great question, and it's annually. So every year there's a review panel that's made up of the major fire service organizations. I think there's 8 or 9 of them, and they're all invited down to Washington, D.C. to sit in the conference room and go over the notice of funding opportunity and find out what changes need to be made from the previous year. And I do think that the COVID-19 pandemic is going to provide an opportunity for those folks to have a discussion about how we could better serve our community during a pandemic in the fire and EMS world. So yeah, every year the criteria development panel meets, and I'm sure they're going to talk a lot about response to pandemic.
Okay, great. Another question, can CERT members complete this application, or is it only for firefighter or fire departments?
So as far as completing the application, your firefighters, any firefighter in your department can do it. Also, a very popular item, folks hire grant writers to do it. And one thing I'd like to mention on that note is, if you hire a grant writer to do this application for you and you get the grant, FEMA will pay for your grant writer. It will reimburse you for what it costs you to pay the grant writer. If you hire a grant writer and you do not get the grant, you will not be reimbursed for what you paid the grant writer. Does that answer the question?
I think so. If not, if the person who answered the question or has the question, if you can write in the chat, we can clarify. But another question is, how many applications are submitted versus the number of awards that are granted in a typical year?
That's a great question. So what I can tell you is every year, my area of responsibility, which is New York, New Jersey, Puerto Rico, and the Virgin Islands, there's about 200 grantees a year. And I'm going to say there's probably about 600 or 700 applications for our area of responsibility. I do not have the national statistics for you, but if you're in the Region 2 area of responsibility, which is my jurisdiction, I could tell you that you're probably going up against 500 or 600 applicants, maybe more, and about 200 of those folks are going to get awards.
Okay, one last question. Are there any expected changes with the guidelines from last year to this year? For example, the addition of modifications to facilities, activities now eligible as a microgrant.
So the notice of funding opportunity for 2020 has not yet been released, and it has not yet been sent out for review for folks like myself. So, we'll do an internal review first, and then it gets published with new information. So I don't know what's new in there. I do know that we have to wait for the criteria development panel to have their meeting and discuss what may or not change. So I don't have a good answer for that one yet, but keep an eye out for the NOFO, because when the NOFO is published, on the very first couple pages there, it's going to say what has changed since last year, and it's going to give you a list of some of the changes.
Okay, well, thank you, Brian. I think that's our time, 12:30. I did put Brian's email in the chat box because I'm going to change the slides. We do have some upcoming webinars. This Thursday, we have a webinar coming up on FEMA Corps. Next week, we have webinars on hurricane readiness for the USBI and engaging youth in preparedness. So if you want to register, you can click on those links. Thank you so much, Brian. Do you have anything else you'd like to add?
No, thanks everyone for joining in. I know it was brief, but if there's some items that you think I went over too quickly, reach out to me. I would be happy to chat with you one-on-one.
Okay, thank you. We do have some polls on the screen. If you can please let us know what you thought of today's presentation. Please register for upcoming webinars, and we'll see you soon. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks. Take care.